Let's say you're running Facebook and your browser calls facebook.com. So you have a website that fetches a bunch of HTML. And with that HTML, there's a bunch of resources that the browser has to fetch. Maybe a CSS file or an image or a JavaScript file. Most web pages have several such fetches. Now, fetching these resources takes time. Now, after you fetch these for the first time, if you refresh the page or go to another page in the same website, it's very likely that these files will have to be fetched again. And so instead of going all the way to the server, you can just cache these responses of these HTTP requests on the browser. If we cache each of these responses in the browser, then we can fetch them really quickly just from our local machine and speed up the overall page load. Now, in the browser, there's two types of caches. Broadly speaking, there's the HTTP cache and there's object cache. In the HTTP cache, the browser looks at HTTP requests and automatically caches them for future use. How does it know which HTTP response to cache? Well, as part of the response, the server that returns this file, for example, will have a parameter that tells the browser if it can cache that response or not. So if you've heard of the cache control header inside an HTTP response, it's one of the most popular ways the server communicates with the browser, telling it if it should cache that response or not. And so the browser, on seeing these parameters, automatically caches these requests. And so this is the most widely used form of cache, right? You don't need to do any extra implementation for the most part. Now, object caches are available to you as a programmer. If you want to store something in the browser, you can manually add key value pairs. For example, let's say you want to have the user's profile information handy. Using JavaScript, you can access the local storage. There's a variable called local storage, and you can call the add function and you can say user profile as the key and maybe like a JSON as the value. So for example, if you wanted to store the user profile information in the cache so that you can fetch it later, you can manually add that to this key value store. Now within object caches, there are many different kinds, but I'll give you an overview of the main ones. So the first one is cookies, second is local storage, and the third is session storage. Now, cookies are usually used to store authentication information, and we'll not cover this for now because it's its own topic. Local storage and session storage give you more flexibility. You can store pretty much anything in these, and typically you're limited to like around 5 to 10 megabytes in size. The main difference between local storage and session storage is that session storage goes away when you close a tab, whereas local storage stays, right, until you explicitly clear the cache or delete it from code. So this is how you can use caches on the browser to avoid going to servers altogether. And in an interview, the HTTP cache is a very good thing to bring up because it's very versatile and pretty much all websites use this automatically. So if you're asked, how would you improve the performance of your front-end application? This is something you can bring up.